Hello, welcome to my channel. This channel is for educational purposes. We look into a lot of theories of everything, all-encompassing theories that people worked on for their whole lives, didn't really get any credit, didn't make any money, but did it for the love of truth. And they may not have actually gotten to the truth, but they were approaching it, and maybe made a few mistakes, but a lot of their work is very salvageable. Today is video number 228 on the reciprocal system of theory from Dewey B. Larson. Mr. Larson was an engineer who lived back in the 20th century, started working out his theories, his reciprocal system, in about 1930, and kept at it until he died in 1990. Wrote a lot of books, a lot of articles, and the basic idea behind the reciprocal system is that we live in a universe of motion. The universe is made out of motion, and motion is the relationship between space and time. Space and time have a generalized reciprocal relationship, therefore. Motion is basically a fraction, with time or space as the numerator and space or time as the denominator. But it's a little bit more difficult than that, because space and time both can come in multiple dimensions, 3 or more dimensions. That's what Larson calls coordinate space and coordinate time. And then there is also the aspect of scalar motion. Scalar motion is a motion that has a magnitude, but it has no particular direction. An example of this, Larson calls the clock. So there is clock time. Time is always getting later and later and later, but in no particular direction. And clock space. Space is always getting farther and farther apart, but again, in no particular direction, which you can envision by taking a balloon, putting some dots on it with a magic marker and blowing up the balloon. All the dots are moving away from each other, but in no particular direction, or in all directions. Space and time also are quantized, meaning that they have come in only discrete units. There's a minimum unit of time and a minimum unit of space. Less than that does not exist. So 1 unit of time, 1 unit of space in 1 unit of time is the speed of light. So in Larson's system, 1 is the speed of light. He calls that unit speed. And half of the universe is moving faster than the speed of light. Larson calls that the cosmic sector. And that is the sector that our legacy scientists know very little about. And then there is the material sector, the half of the universe that's moving slower than the speed of light, which is the half that Einstein was referencing when he said that nothing moves faster than the speed of light. And that material sector is well known by scientists, and they have done a lot of measuring and observing and calculating in that sector. But since time and space are reciprocals, all we have to do to understand the cosmic sector is to extrapolate what is in the material sector and then reverse the roles of space and time. So for example, you have in the material sector, you have coordinate space, 3 dimensions of space, and clock time. Time is always getting later and later. But in the cosmic sector, you have coordinate time and clock space. Space is always getting further and further apart. So that's an example of how you would apply that reciprocal relationship. Now, Larson has written many, many books on various topics: physics and astrophysics, and chemistry and astronomy, and metaphysics and economics, religion and philosophy and psychology and others, but he didn't delve into anthropology a whole lot, or geophysics. So we are looking at some of the work of Dr. Bruce Perret, who was one of Larson's followers, although I don't believe that Bruce ever met Larson, but he did read a lot of his works, and toward the end of Larson's life, and he started to write about Larson's stuff, the reciprocal system, right around the time that Larson died, I believe. And Perret, unfortunately, also passed away in 2020. And he wrote a lot of his articles are, a lot of them are under his name, but he also wrote under a pen name called Daniel Phoenix III, the Daniel Papers. Daniel claimed to be one of the computer programmers for the Montauk Project, top secret government black ops time travel experiments that occurred in the early 1980s. And a lot of that stuff is kind of mind-blowing, and I'm not sure what to think of it, and I'm not sure if Daniel actually was a member of this or if he's just making that up. But he wrote a number of articles under the Daniel Papers, and I think they actually popularized the reciprocal system to a great degree. He very well understands the reciprocal system, but he also is very imaginative and speculates quite a bit wildly on various matters. So, that's that. But we're going to look, we're reading his article that's called Geochronology, which is part one of his anthropology, of his 4-part anthropology series. And we are in the middle of a section that's called plate tectonics, growing a planet with expansion tectonics. And we're going to start right here. So, as a natural consequence of planetary design, we find not a static sphere, but planets that increase in size with time, in sudden steps that rearrange their surfaces, accompanied with a lot of volcanic activity and usually resulting in a crustal rotation. These features are observed on the Earth, planets, and moons. In our ancient history, the planet they describe was physically smaller. The oceans were not as broad as they are now, and the continents were arranged differently. In the earliest of days, prior to any oceans, all the continents fit together, like puzzle pieces in one small, hardened mud ball. Pangaea was an entire planet of dry land prior to the expansion, not a supercontinent on a water world. Okay, I'm just kind of looking at some of Larson's footnotes here. Perret Daniel's footnotes here, because we just finished this section. He does talk about the asthenosphere, the source of crude oil, and says that crude oil refills itself over time. An unlimited supply of oil exists just a few miles below the surface. The most accessible point where the crust is thinned, offshore, where those thousands upon thousands of deep water horizon drilling platforms are. And yes, you are running your car on bacteria poop, not decomposed dinosaurs. we shall move on now to the next section, which is called Ancient Cartography. With what you know about the size of the planet changing over time, look at some of the maps of the ancient cartographers. The first map he refers to is the Orontius Phineas Delphinus map from 1531. Note that Antarctica extends up to the Tropic of Capricorn, and the map shows mountains on the continent indicating minimal ice caps. The oceans are substantially smaller, and Italy is almost touching Africa. The continental arrangement makes no sense now, but reduce the size of the planet and it tells a story of ancient times, of a smaller world with easily traversable seas, land bridges between continents for the migrations of peoples, and an entirely different climate than we have now. And this is not the only map of those times to indicate such a structure. Maps like these are found all over the world, indicating common knowledge among seafarers. Notes from the ancient map makers say that these were copied from even older maps, and how Christopher Columbus knew there was a new world out there to find again. He just did not realize the Earth expanded, and the oceans were a lot wider in 1492 than when the maps were originally made. He's got a couple pictures of these maps here. There's one from 1607, the Jodocus Herodias map, first issued in the Mercator Hondius Atlas Minor, and showing South America attached to Antarctica. And Abraham Aurelius's double hemisphere world map from the late 16th century. Okay, now this section is called the early structure of the solar system. Fortunately, the gods provided us with some detailed descriptions of the early days, our mythology. Knowing what we do about geochronology and the structure of the Earth, these mythological records take on a different meaning, one that tends to fit the natural consequences of our theoretical development. In order to understand what mythology is describing, a more detailed picture of the early solar system is needed, one that is based on natural evolutionary consequences. As mentioned in my geoengineering paper, one of the most important discoveries Larson made from the natural consequences of his reciprocal system is that astronomy is backwards. Astronomers work with snapshots of the universe, and they lined up their Polaroids from tail to head rather than from head to tail, and then tried to make sense of it. So the natural flow of evolution of planets, stars, and galaxies was completely missed. Larson's stellar evolution sequence proceeds from dust to a red giant, orange giant, then on to the mainstream, and up to the blue supergiant, then a Type II supernova explosion at the thermal limit, following the spectral class sequence of N, R, M, K, G, F, A, B, O, which is the opposite of what the legacy astronomers use, where they use the, I don't remember what you call this, but acronym, I don't know. Oh, be a fine girl, kiss me. That is the exact opposite of the order here that's presented by Pret, but he also adds the N and R stars at the beginning. So those are, I guess, the dust and the red giant stars. But unlike conventional astronomy, stellar evolution does not stop with the supernova, because the supernova explodes its outer shell into space and the inner core into 3D time, coordinate time. Whereas an explosion in time is analogous to an implosion in space. What you end up with is a super dense, invisible object emitting X-rays surrounded by a large quantity of dust and debris concentrated in a ring, the black hole and its accretion disk. So Larsen Perret refers to this as a black hole, but this is not, this is not the black hole of the legacy scientists. Okay, now we know the mechanism. We also know that this black hole isn't a hole at all. It is just the spatial location of a temporal explosion. As spatial gravity pulls the dust and rock together to form a new red giant star, temporal gravity will pull the black hole together in time, expanding and cooling it in space, moving it from X-rays to visible light, resulting in the formation of the very common red giant white dwarf stellar binary. And the situation can repeat ad infinitum, producing stellar triplets, quadruplets, quintuplets, etc., or stars with solar systems. Larsen refers to this recursion of stars as generations. The first generation is a star that has not yet become a supernova, being found primarily in globular clusters. The second generation is the stellar binary. The third generation can either be a stellar triplet or a single star with a solar system. The formation of a planetary system during the third stellar generation occurs when the non-white dwarf star of a binary, what Larsen calls the A component, explodes in a type 1 supernova. The energy accelerates the white dwarf companion into ultra-high speed ranges, anti-gravity, so it begins to move away from the A component, then was broken up into a number of fragments. Should the white dwarf component explode instead, the mostly gaseous A component would just be splattered around to reform into a star, producing a stellar triplet. As we saw earlier, the two linear units from 0 to the one-dimensional limit correspond to 8 three-dimensional units. The constituents of the white dwarf are thus distributed to a number of distinct speed limits with a maximum of 7. When Larsen refers to speeds, he is talking about a scalar speed, not a translational one. Scalar motion increases or decreases in integer steps, not a smooth transition. So any internal scalar speed of a fragment 2 between 2 and 3 would be a speed of 2. There are no fractional parts. Because of this quantized separation, the fragments fall into tight, discrete orbits, and the pieces tend to consolidate in those orbits into one large chunk we call a planet. This is unnoticed because of all the initial debris from a supernova explosion, and by the time the dust settles, You just have a single planet in each discrete orbit. But also notice that Larson states that states a speed limit of 8 three-dimensional units that are linearly distributed from 0 to 7. That means that there are just 8 stable orbits in any solar system. In the RS2 reevaluation, it was found that's reciprocal system 2. Perret is basically one of the 2 authors of the reciprocal system 2, which was an attempt to kind of correct some of the sticking points in Larson's system. So in the RS2 reevaluation, it was found that there is no preferred direction of a scalar motion in space. So these 8 units are equally divided, plus and minus 4, about the center of the explosion, which forms the neutral speed zone. So these 8 units actually form 9 orbits, 4 inner, a neutral zone, and 4 outer, corresponding to the 4 inner planets, the asteroid belt, and then the 4 outer planets, excluding Pluto. Okay, we're going to stop it right there. Now, Perret is a little bit more engaging than Larson, but he also does, bring in a lot of difficult concepts that are. He jumps around a lot, and if you're not familiar with the reciprocal system, he can be hard to follow. Just try to pick up what you can and mull it over, sleep on it, come back and take some more. That's how you do the reciprocal system. You just have to take what you can get and hope that it eventually forms a coherent picture in your mind. All right. It will be worth it if you stick with it and do it that way. You will gain some valuable understandings. All right. Well, thank you for tuning in, and have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.